Good morning, Survivor Rites. It is Sunday morning, and we have another amazing guest here today. We are live this morning with Bruce Murdoch from Wings for Truth. So, he has a lot of information that he's going to be sharing with us today. We'll be taking questions at the very, very end, but I can honestly say you are not going to want to miss out on this one because he has been doing this a lot longer than the rest of us, I can tell you that. And there's so much to it. I know exactly what it takes to do what you do, Bruce, except, well, maybe I don't. You've been doing it so much longer. Maybe you can teach me a thing or two. That's what I'm hoping for anyway. Um, okay, so I'm going to just open it up and let you go because you have an incredible story, and I just will try my hardest to keep my mouth shut.
Okay,
Welcome.
well, thanks. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to this, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yes.
I'm sort of thinking that we'll do it in three parts. One will be a bit of my background up to 2010 when I joined Wings, and then 2010 till 2024, my involvement with Wings and what we've been doing, and then 2024 involves my exit from the meeting system. And so three sort of distinct sections here, and so I will. I'll just start with a little bit of background on myself. Um, my grandparents entered the meeting system in between 1910 and 1920, all four of them, as well as one great grandparent. So we go back a long way, and my parents, all of their siblings and spouses were involved in the church right up until the end in their lives. Uh, Most of them involved in eldership and so on. So we were deeply connected with the church in that way. Um, I grew up in a small town in Western Canada, and we had one little church, and our family was kind of the church. My dad was the elder. We had the meetings there. Um, we had maybe a dozen people in our group, and we were fairly, I wouldn't say isolated, but we were pretty distinct because it was a small town, and the next group of friends was maybe an hour away. So um, we were kind of on our own there, which was a good thing. A couple of things about my early life, which was good. Um, I should mention that I did profess at age 9, um, way too young, um, too young to make such a decision. But I loved my parents, and if it was good enough for them, it was good enough for me, as well as my older brother. So that was kind of the basis of my profession. I was also pretty scared of hell. I didn't want to go to hell, so that was a factor as well. But there were some good things about my upbringing. In fact, I had a wonderful childhood. It was really great. But one of the things, a couple things. One of the things that was really valuable was that my parents had the policy of not um, overtly pressuring us or trying to fit us into a mold. Their belief was to back off and let us develop our own personalities, our own beliefs, and so on. I didn't realize until adulthood that that wasn't common at all amongst
Right.
the friends growing up. But that really helped me later on in life to be more individualistic rather than sort of controlled by the group. Um, the other thing that in my early years was a discussion I had with my brother. I was about 15, he was maybe 17, and we discussed exclusivity. And his point was that most of us are born in this church, and we're just a tiny, tiny percentage of the world's population. How can this possibly be the only way? And I go, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And so that sort of stuck in the back of my mind the rest of my life, and it came forward later when I confronted the exclusivity issue. And I remembered, yeah, I was never particularly embracing of exclusivity at all. So it was really easy for me to make the total shift away from being exclusive, and eventually I became extremely non-exclusive. But anyway, that's another story. So anyway, I grew up with a pretty normal life. We played sports. Got involved in high school politics.
Wow.
There was very little. We were a little more conservative than the average general public, but not particularly weird by any means. We didn't have a TV. We were allowed to go to one movie a year at Christmas time, a free one. I played in a band. All my friends were school friends. I had lots of friends, and I've reconnected with most of them as well over the years. So that was my growing up. It's pretty normal from a general public point of view, and not particularly typical of somebody growing up in the meeting system. So that was very, very helpful to me later on as I made other adjustments. So anyway, I went to university in another city, in a bigger city. At that time, there was about, at that university, University of Manitoba, there was about 13 friends involved at university itself. So my social life became involved with the friends almost exclusively at that time, because it was great. They were, we had a lot of fun. We were kids our age, and so that became my social life in Winnipeg, and further on. So then, in my early 30s, we got married and had kids, and then the next 15 or 20 years was focused on family and work in business. I've been in business for myself, so that was kind of, everything else was sort of in the background, whether it was meetings or whether it was beliefs or philosophies or whatever. I was mostly focused on family for all those years. So then fast forward to the late 1990s, and what started to change for me then was the fact that there was excommunications going on in Western Canada. There was quite a lot of them happening in Alberta, and at the time I was told, we were told, well, this is just a local problem, and I started to question that, and that's when I got involved with discussions with mainly ex-professing people on a listserv in the late 90s, and I've been talking ever since to everybody that I can. And so I discovered that, of course, this wasn't just a local problem. It was a worldwide problem in terms of excommunication, exclusivity, and so on. And so in the early 2000s, we had a case of excommunication locally, and I was in an elders meeting with regards to that discussion. And so excommunication got me thinking about examining some beliefs. But this particular meeting that I was in, everyone was in favor of the excommunication except for myself. And this was a real watershed moment for me, because I'm looking at it from a point of view of justice and fairness and kindness and compassion and so on. And suddenly I had to make a decision between church and God. And I never believed that that was even possible, that would be two different decisions. And so at that time I thought, I've got to pick God. And to me, God was compassion, kindness, and so on. So that was my choice, and so I stood up against that excommunication. And that was a real, like I say, a watershed moment for me. I never believed that that would ever happen, but it did. And it really created a real separation between myself and some of the local friends. So give it a year or two later, just to make a long story short, some of my activities resulted in an excommunication attempt for myself, towards myself. And, well, I won't get into all the details of it because we're going to run out of time here.
Yes.
But the excommunication failed. But then I realized at that time, I could see the writing on the wall that this wasn't gonna end well in the long run. So at that time, I started to realize, well, I have to really look at my beliefs, examine everything. from ground up. And so I went through about 5 years of what we now call deconstruction. To me, I called it unwinding and reviewing all my beliefs. And I came to two conclusions at the end of that 4 or 5 years: is that I would be a lifelong learner, and that I would adopt no belief or opinion without solid evidence. So those two things resulted in an easy evolution of my worldview, my beliefs, and so on. And I'm still evolving that way because I still accept those two principles. And I expect I will evolve. The evolution is not happening fast right now, but I expect I will still evolve right to the end of my life. So that was a good experience. And then in around 2008, there was another excommunication locally. Again, I stood up against that one. And again, there was another excommunication attempt against me, and the overseer didn't approve it. Different overseer this time than the one that didn't approve it the first time. But at that point, I realized, I'm totally separate. So that was about 2008. And in the meantime, I'm discussing many issues with mostly ex-professing people, but a number of professing people as well. Things like exclusivity and things like CSA was starting to become more and more obvious that there was an issue there. And so in 2010, so that's kind of my life up to 2010, and that's when Scott Ross, who was leading Wings at the time, invited me to come on board with Wings, which was established in 2008. So I came on board in 2010, and one of his purposes was to bring in more insiders. At that point, it was all ex-professing people, and he wanted more insiders involved. And so there was after 2010, we had about 15 people involved with Wings, about half in, half out. And it worked really well. We worked well together because one of the things that Scott wanted to make sure that we did was that we were church neutral. That was a key principle of Wings. We did not want to weaponize CSA, use victims and survivors as weapons against the church. So we stayed that way religiously until today. We're church neutral. And so number one is survivors, and number two is prevention of offenses. So that's been kind of our two key activities from 2010 on, since I've been involved. And as far as the church goes, if the church does the right thing, we will acknowledge that. If it does the wrong thing, we'd acknowledge that. It doesn't really matter. All we want is to get it right. And so our purpose was to try to reform the church and to inform others, to raise awareness amongst parents that this was an issue. One of the things that inspired me to get involved with Wings is that I was never a victim myself. There was a couple attempts by men when I was younger, and I escaped them. But I remember those incidences very, very clearly, and so that kind of helps me understand what survivors experience, because I wasn't really offended or repeatedly offended, and yet those experiences are burned into my memory, and at a very young age. So that part helps me to understand survivors who were really victimized badly. So that was one thing. And the other thing was a friend of mine from Ireland came out publicly about his experience as a survivor quite some time before. And that always inspired me. It just impressed me that somebody had such courage to do that. And so when I was invited on with Wings, I'm thinking, if he can do that, I can do this at least and help out. So I certainly don't have a background in social sciences. I'm more of a math guy, but I was there to help. And so that's how I got involved. So some of the things that we've done over the years, obviously we've dealt with, communicated with survivors over the years. We created a website pretty much right off the bat. We set up a private site called Breaking the Silence for survivors to, very, very private, and for survivors to help each other discuss issues.
What year was
Um,
that? What year did you start
uh,
that?
that would, I can't say what year for sure, but it was very, very early on. It would be by 2012, I would think,
Mhm.
2013. Um, One of our board members found the Ministry Safe course, and we recommended it to an overseer in the U.S. who accepted it for his staff. And now, today, many, many workers have taken Ministry Safe, which we thought would be valuable. In the end, I think is more of a ticking of the boxes, is
Yeah,
what's happened, because the Ministry Safe course is very, very simplistic.
yeah,
It's just a starter course, and which was good, but yet what we're finding is that, I took the course, I'm good, I'm done. And so it was more of a ticking of the box. So it wasn't as valuable as we had hoped it would be, but it was something anyway, and it's now pretty common. In 2012, 2013, I was personally tasked with coordinating the development of a code of conduct. And so I accessed everybody I could. And so I had about 30 advisors working on this code of conduct. We did have a couple of professionals that were involved. In fact, one particular person probably offered maybe half of the input of the code of conduct. We completed in 2013. We sent it to every overseer and senior worker that we had addresses for all around the world. And of course, you can probably anticipate the response, which was zero. And we had discussions with one overseer, ongoing discussions. Scott was really good with that, but that was really the only one. It was an overseer out of Texas, and so we had some discussions with him, but other than that, silence. And
you were still
so,
professing at that point,
pardon me.
and you were still professing at that point.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm still professing till 2024.
Yes,
Okay, so
I just wanted to clarify that.
yeah, so I'm still under the impression that that reform is possible.
Right.
I'm thinking that our values are there. Who could possibly ignore child sexual abuse and not make changes to prevent it and not make changes to help survivors? How could
Yes.
they not do that? And sure enough, we reform was very, very difficult. Um, the code of conduct that we did develop was actually pretty much used as a template when the Australian workers developed a code of conduct. Because when you read theirs in 2018, 2019, it's very, very similar to ours. And so that was something that was of value. And when I look back at that code of conduct today, it's not perfect by any means, but it wasn't bad. It's still not a bad one. And we had some advice in there, things like we wanted workers to never stay in homes where there was children. And if there was no other option, one night only. So there was no chance for grooming. So those are the sort of things that we were advising, and but of course that nobody ever took that advice. So um, anyway, another thing that we developed was a database of allegations, and by about 2013, 2014, we had nearly 200 alleged perpetrators or convicted offenders.
Right.
Now, of course, that's much smaller than what we know now today of 11 or 1200, But the thing is that 150 to 200 was totally organic. I mean, it was just grassroots information coming in. So we knew by then, when we had that kind of number, that it was a serious problem.
Mm-hmm.
Years later, of course, now with the bigger numbers, we now know it's a much more serious problem than we thought 10 years ago, or I even thought 5 years ago. We knew it was sort of similar to the Roman Catholic Church problems, but now we know it's significantly worse than Roman Catholic system. So that's kind of some of the work that we did. Scott Ross passed away a few years ago, and then we sort of went into maintenance mode. And then suddenly, March 2023, everything broke loose with this seismic event of Mr. Brewer and the revelations with regards to what he was doing. Everything blew up. And at this time, there was really basically 3 active board members on Wings. And my phone blew up, my messages blew up, my email, everything did. And for about 2 or 3 months, it was just nonstop. People wanting to know what's going on, what do we know, what can we share, and so on. And so it was an extremely busy time, and we realized we needed more help. So we reactivated one of our old board members. We managed to add 2 more. In 2023, we had 3 men, 2 down under, and myself. We needed more women in leadership here, so we now have 6 active board members, 3 men, 3 women, 3 down under, 2 in North America, and 1 in Europe. And so we're pretty much covered. Some are professionals, some are victims as well. So that really relieved a lot of the pressure on us when these others came in to help us out. Just to give you an idea of the extent of the explosion, you might say, in 2023, our website typically got about 30 to 40,000 page views per year, going right back a decade. In 2024, we got 4.2 million page views. 4.2 million page views in 2023. In 2024, it was still over 2 million page views. So the interest in this thing just totally exploded. And of course, we can see now with so many people exiting, this event had a huge effect on the church and an awakening for so many people. And but those numbers alone just show you how people were affected by this, and it's huge.
Seismic activity.
Yeah, it's a seismic event for sure. Yeah, and so anyway, I'm not sure what else. Okay, so as far as the database goes, Cynthia has that now. We turn everything over to her. We're not maintaining that at all. And in fact, what Wings has more or less become is what we would call the trusted news source.
Yes.
We're very, very careful. We're not perfect. We haven't always put out perfect information, but we're dedicated to only publishing the truth and accurate information. So, I mean, we have withdrawn information more than once, but if we're wrong, we'll fix it. That's not a problem. So, and I think that's, whenever we do put out a post or an article, we do get a high number of readers. So we have a lot of followers on that. So, yeah, so people look to us for news now, and that's kind of what we're mainly do now. So what we also have done too, of course, what I've been involved with, particularly as sort of the only publicly known board member of Wings, I've been involved with a number of interviews. I worked with the BBC articles, George Wright, worked with him on that particular case well, particularly on the first, excuse me, the first article I worked with George on. And so interviews, I had interviews with CBC in Canada. The funniest thing is that one of the clips ended up on national TV, which I never would have thought at my age that I'd ever have a clip show up on national TV. But anyway, but that's kind of what my involvement has been with, working with some media here and there, and doing interviews with them. And so as it stands right now, this is kind of where we're at right now with Wings. Is that we're the trusted news site, and we will work with media to get information out there right now. So that kind of takes us up to more or less the present, and sort of fast forwards me to my exit from the meeting system. So up till, in fact, by 2023 event was not traumatic to me. In fact, it offered hope. When I saw this, I'm thinking, how can anyone not reform when they see this? So when this event came along, I'm not happy to hear that we've got another bad guy, but I am happy that people are paying attention, and it offered chance for reform. So during 2023, there was all these listening tours, workers listening to people. There was professional people involved in developing codes of conduct and so on, and I remained very hopeful until the end of 2023. November, it started to get rejected. All of this professional work got rejected. And it was November of 2023, I finally came to the conclusion that the church was incorrigible, could not be changed. There was no interest in changing. Reform is impossible. And I realized in November 2023, I couldn't. I'm wasting my time trying to push for reform within the church. And I knew I had to leave at that time. So we had a family health emergency in November 2023, so I didn't put in my formal resignation until later when that situation cleared up. But it was 2024. I wrote a final exit resignation, and basically 4 reasons of CSA. And the inability to make proper changes in that regard. So that was later on in 2024. That event wasn't a traumatic event at all. I'd already recognized the writing on the wall 20 years ago that sooner or later this is going to end. I made changes to my social life, developed social friends outside of the meeting system, and so as far as the day before I wrote my resignation letter and the day after was really no different, other than I wasn't attending anywhere on Wednesday night or Sunday morning. That was really the only change that went through with me, because I had already gone through the transition over all those years. I would say that I was disconnected from my emotional connection or devotional connection to the church 20 years ago. And I'd say I've been fairly objective about the church since then. And so this change to exit the church was already done, I guess you might say, by the time I wrote the resignation letter. So that there was no transition at that time. It had already been done. And so there we are today. One thing that was also good in a family situation is my wife still attends, and one of my kids still attends. But we dealt with exclusivity over 20 years ago. And so my daughter doesn't attend, I don't attend, and yet we're all supportive, because nobody thinks anyone else is necessarily going to hell because of attendance. And
Right.
so it's a really good situation. We do not have a split in our personal family. And so,
Right.
so that's been good because we dealt with exclusivity a long time ago. It didn't
That's
have to
great.
be a member in order to go to heaven.
Hmm.
So, yeah, that's kind of my story and my involvement with Wings, and there's way more to tell, but
Yeah.
I don't want to keep everybody on here forever. So,
Well,
any any questions?
yeah, let's open it up for questions. So there's a lot of people watching. Go ahead, and if you guys would just put your questions into comments that you have for him. I love the fact that you have kept it church neutral. I have tried very difficultly to do that in both Worthy of the World and Survivor Rights. It's a very fine line and a very difficult one to walk, partly because the pendulum swings for people who have left so far over, in many cases, to anti-Christianity and anti-God, and that. So I would love to have that conversation with you maybe offline, because I personally have been out for a long, long time, and so I feel very church neutral. I love very much many of the people who are still in fellowship, and I am not trying to persecute anybody by speaking truth. So I would be curious how you've walked that line, because it's a tough line. Um,
Well, yeah, and my theology has evolved greatly
right.
over time, and so I found it much more difficult to be involved in a Christian church
Yeah.
because my my beliefs and values didn't always line up properly. In fact, I call myself a post-Christian now,
Mm.
not an atheist. But when I say a post-Christian, I say what I define it as leaving the bad parts behind and taking the good parts with me. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I don't believe in an anthropomorphic God or a human-like God. I define God today as simply love and truth.
Mm-hmm.
When I see love in action, or if I see truth emerging, I see God right in
Mm.
front of me,
Right.
uh, as opposed to a sort of a puppet master type being
Right.
up in the
Right.
sky, right?
Right.
So that makes God, in that sense, a very, very real personal thing to me, but yet not this man with a beard on a
Yes.
throne, you know. So
Angry.
that's yeah,
Yeah.
ready to punish you,
Right. Punishing God.
send
Yeah.
you to hell or whatever if you didn't say the right thing.
Right.
So yeah, that became that evolved over years, right? And it continues to evolve,
Yeah.
and so it became more difficult to stay actively involved in a Christian
Yeah.
church. I had to find areas where my values lined up with the
Right.
values that are in the church, and so that became more and more narrow as time went on, and be more difficult to hang in there.
Yeah.
Um, but eventually, I got there, and I'm quite happy being outside of a regular Christian system, for sure.
Hmm. I'm with you
But yet
there.
at the same time, the neutrality is not a problem. I
Right.
respect others' beliefs. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, very much so. And I always say we're not trying to tell anybody what to believe. We're trying to give you many different perspectives here so that you can make that decision on your own. With that said, one of the other things that has been one of the biggest fallouts, I'm actually heading to Portland this week. I'm going to spend some time with Cynthia and Natalie. And we have so much to talk about, but part of it is the humanitarian crisis that's left at the remainder of this, and the deep, deep wounds that people carry from so many levels, and the responsibility that we have as a community to give them resources and to help them and to lift them up, and how much time and energy that takes, and how much love, because they don't many of them have not experienced the unconditional, loving love. They are used to a fearful, punishing situation in God. So that part of it is a little bit difficult. But um, I I want to talk about the humanitarian crisis, but more than what I want to do, I want to answer questions here. So we have a question from Karen saying, thank you so much. Her question is, you mentioned you left because of CSA. Where do you stand on misuse of money and levels within the ministers at the top and only being saved through the ministry?
Yeah, so I did mention exclusivity. To me, that is among the worst doctrines of this group. So many bad actions and evil works come from exclusivity. Exclusivity promotes religious pride and arrogance. And it's just, and I've become completely non exclusive. I don't condemn a Muslim or a Hindu, or so I don't even take the Christian boundaries. I go well beyond it. I'm not going to condemn an atheist, for instance. So, but as far as I'm concerned, the exclusivity doctrine is one of the worst doctrines that we have. As far as money goes, the opacity of the money system is also terrible. When accountability doesn't exist for things like money, it's not going to end up well. And we are quite convinced that there's a lot of money out there. Here's a good example. I had somebody that involved with the meetings in Ecuador who approached me for help. Well, I'm not even involved with the meetings anymore, and so I've been helping this person. And I said to them, "Well, why don't you connect with the workers there? They got lots of money, and it doesn't take much money to help somebody in Ecuador." Mm-hmm. And she said, "I've tried, and I get no answer." And so here's all this money here, but it's not being used well. It's being used for airplane trips, for convention tours all over the world, and occasionally first class. So, that's the money management is just terrible, absolutely terrible. It should be completely on the open, and everyone should see how it operates. And that way, I mean, we do know for a fact that that there has been fraud happen and misuse of funds. Over the years, we've seen this happen in different countries. So, that openness just will prevent fraud and misuse of money, for sure. Now, as far as CSA goes, for my leaving, that was my stated reason, and it really was my primary reason. I wanted to reform the system to protect children, and basically I failed. And I don't mind admitting that, but we did all we could to do that, and I got to a point where there's nothing more I can do.
Right.
When I left, the only negative feeling I had was the feeling that I had betrayed my ancestors. I just feel like I didn't do enough, and I failed my parents and my grandparents by not making these changes the way they should happen. But that's the reality. We did what we could, and so now it's, as you mentioned, it's the humanitarian crisis. That's where we can help now. We can help the people that are struggling and going through the transition and finding their legs again outside of the meeting system. And that's what I'm trying to do today. I just finished a tour right across BC, a 2,100 kilometer tour, mainly family, but I met lots of ex-professing people. We're all at different parts in our journey, and some of the intense conversations were just fantastic. Everybody's just, so far, everybody has these different viewpoints, and yet we're accepting of each other. And that's so valuable for people. I'm not, like I mentioned, I'm not a social scientist, and so this isn't really my thing, but I do love to talk to people, and I do love to listen. I do love to learn from everybody, and so that's valuable. I think it was a very valuable trip. I mean, we had numerous intense conversations over the last 10 days, and so it's a pleasure to sort of help people unwind Well, deconstruct, we call it, or unwind.
Yep. I will agree with you there. It's humbling and it is an honor to be pivotal or helpful at all in just providing information and listening and building those relationships. I feel like, we're trying so hard to build a community now on the outside that is very authentic and very real and very loving and teaches tolerance and models. When we first started, Steve Padden and I had a lot of conversations around, just, well, who's going to do it? If we don't, who is, Like, I don't want anybody to feel like we're telling them what to do or how to live or what to think or anything. But like, the more of us that are out there modeling, that have been out, we've done the work, we've done the deconstruction, like, I feel like we can shave years off of what people would have to figure out on their own. If somebody who had been able to help me not be so alone and put it all together piece by piece by myself while I was raising a child, like, it just would have been life-changing to have a support system, going through that. So anyway, Gail Craig is wanting to reframe what you said. You did not fail, Bruce. The 2x2 church failed. There's no way to fail when acting upon what God revealed to you. I would like to second that, Gail.
Thank you.
And say that very much. And I think, sadly, a lot of people who have been very involved in the reform efforts have tried that. And it's quite emotionally damaging for a bit when you let go and realize that nothing is going to change. I had a lot of emotion around that myself personally, of just that realization for me, because you've said it several times. How could they not? How could anyone that cares at all not care? And not only not care, but they don't even respond. They don't even acknowledge. And then they take it to a whole nother level of harm. And that's where I feel like that like what's being preached now is so harmful and painful, because it's furthering the divide between us and them. And it really maximizes or intensifies our ability to keep things church neutral or to maintain and rebuild relationships, when what they're preaching is to stay away from us and to stay away from any truth at all about facts of what's happening. And, we're not out here just spewing our opinion. I don't think you are either. This is what happened. I love what Pam puts out. Like, this is the list of people who have attended gospel meetings so far in 2026. Those are facts. It's nobody's opinion. So.
Yeah. And what we're up against, I think, is that the primary objective of the leadership of the church is the perpetuation of the church. And that totally reverses the priorities that should occur. Number one should be truth. Number two should be compassion. Number three, there's all kinds of other things that should come before the protection of the system.
Right.
But when the protection of the system is number one, so many other things get distorted and out of line, and we have these problems come up as a result, and it's not a healthy situation.
No.
So, yeah, that's been a long-term concern of mine, and that's probably one of the reasons why we can't get reform.
Right.
Because perpetuation of the status quo is number one.
Yes. Yes. And so back to the emotion that I was talking about a little bit ago, I call that grief. For the most part, it's a level of grief. It's just it's like shock and awe. But at the end of the day, it leaves you with grief. Well, if you look at the stages of grief that are very well known, anger is one of the very first ones. And so, again, going back to these last 3 years, so many people are at different stages. Some are just now even still leaving. Some left a while ago. Some process through anger a lot faster than others. And so processing through and giving people a place to land and a place to have dialogue and a place to voice their opinion without being judged. And, so often, excuse me, we get into the tit for tat and the arguments on some of these sites of it just pow pow, and it's so unnecessary. And it's not becoming of anyone, to be honest. But it's part of the process, and it's something that a lot of people just need to go through. Daryl Johnson saying, a former elder friend of mine uses Wings as his sole source of 2x2 based information as its objective. And I know a lot of people that's true, because you don't have the opinion side of it as much as a lot of other of us do. It's just, here is your independent news source.
Yes, and our focus it's entirely children and survivors. It's not the church.
Right.
So that's kind of how we've dealt with it, and that's been good. I think we've had many people come to us and say, even while they were in the meetings, that they followed Wings even before this. Mm-hmm. And we're quite glad to see that. So, that's worked out very well, I think, and we're gonna maintain that for sure. That church neutrality. We're not there to destroy the church at all.
No.
No, we're there for children. That's it.
Right.
And survivors. Yeah.
Right. And there's, the survivors, what has come out now, partly because I run a very large women's group, is so much of the other domestic violence and so many other abuses that are also very, very real, that are just now coming to light. So naming those things and giving people a voice to have that dialogue and be safe in doing so. I've also seen that there's a lot of guilt around people who were not CSA survivors that feel like, well, they just have guilt that it didn't happen to them, the survivor guilt. It's like when somebody survives a plane crash when everybody died. It's that same feeling of, why didn't it happen to me? And so there's just so many layers. And, when we talk with Pathways to Healing with Natalie Bolin, and, all of the need is so great. And we all are spending so much. It just takes a lot to carry all of that and to move the needle at the same time.
Oh, for sure. And, like you say, this survivor guilt thing, there's also, what I've encountered quite a bit is people saying, why didn't I see this?
Yes.
Like, were my eyes just totally closed? They feel guilty that they never saw this all along. And, you don't see what you're not looking for, right? So that's pretty normal human behavior. So I don't think people should feel guilty for not seeing this earlier.
Right.
But, people still have to deal with that kind of a guilt too.
Yeah.
And I'd say my biggest emotion 20 years ago with my own personal excommunication attempt was disappointment, I would say, because I thought more highly I thought the values of the church were more important than what they were, and the good values got pushed down, and survival of the system got pushed up, and I could hardly believe that was happening, but it was, and so it just became a very deep disappointment to me, and so when we talk about my change in faith, so on, is that I've moved away from faith and I've moved towards values. So I'm cementing values in my life, and I'm dropping a lot of faith issues because I want evidence-based opinions and beliefs. I don't want to believe anything that's just because somebody said it was so.
Right. Yeah. And then it's also understanding how values drive our behavior. I think that there's a lot of people don't really understand how much their programming goes into what drives their behavior and why they continue to have either self-defeating behavior or, so many things that have a cycle to them that has to be broken, and steps that must be taken for them to own I'm here now. I have I had breakfast with somebody the other day, and she just is still angry that half of her life is over. She's just over 50, and like it was a waste, and it was just just the anger about that. And how do I just want to make the next half of my life as good as I possibly can, and like, but I don't even know where to begin. I'm just so stuck in my fear and my anger of what if I'm wrong and what if they're right, and like, it's a lot. It's
It's
so
deep. It
much.
runs very, that's the exclusivity thing. It runs deep
Yes.
when it's put into
Yes.
you as a 4-year old or a 5-year old, right? It's
Yes.
there and it's really hard to get rid of. It's the same
Yes.
thing as my fear of hell, right? We
Right.
talk about abuse, and there's all kinds of abuse, and that's a religious abuse.
Yes, there are
And
all kinds of abuse.
it took a lot of work to get rid of that fear of hell for me, and I'm glad for some people that have helped me through that, and it's gone now, thank goodness. but
Yes.
but yeah, there's all kinds of levels of abuse, as you mentioned, and Wings, we talked about expanding the abuse side of it, and even I mean, we did bring in sexual abuse a little bit, but
Mhm.
we decided to stay with child sexual abuse and not the religious abuse, not the emotional abuse that goes on
Right.
domestically. It's just that we wanted to stay in that particular lane because again, it's so critical for children, right?
It is.
Because traumatic events that happen as children stay with people, and we know that people that have been uh, violated as children multiple times, it changes them for a lifetime.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Very much so.
So yeah, so it's almost on the level of murder.
Yeah.
Maybe worse because people have to live a lifetime of pain.
Yes.
So that's why we wanted to stick with the children aspect.
I love that. And I think, that's why I don't ever worry about how many people are in the space of what we're doing to help, because the more the better. Like the more love, the more support, the more dialogue around all of it. I personally have a huge focus on women, and that's just kind of just it's not only my interest, but it's also something that I deeply care about. And so just helping them figure out their identity of how to wear makeup or get rid of the 40-pound jean skirt or whatever it is, find your style, even redesign your house. What do you do with this room that used to be exclusively for the workers? You can turn that into anything you want. It is no longer, but it's so many factors that women, and so unraveling all of that and making it fun and having fun with it instead of it just being so all the time, because this is a very oppressive conversation. And we've had an oppressed life. I feel like in general, it's like joy is not part of the equation if you're a two by two for the most part. But and I appreciate the
Yeah.
fact that you use the word church. It has been brought to my awareness lately. Someone literally said the words uh, that when they hear somebody say the two by two, they equate it to being called a spick. And boy, did I take that personally, because I don't mean to say it as a slang. Um, it's just kind of become the term that we use. And I've noticed this morning that you refer to it as the church and the fellowship.
Right, right. I've always avoided the term cult. Um, Not that I would say that it's not a cult, but the term cult has often been weaponized
Yes.
and used as a tool to create emotion against the church.
Right.
And I really don't want to encourage people to hate the church or
No.
hate anybody in it at
Right.
all. And so I do tend to avoid using the term cult. And if somebody asks me, usually when people ask me, do you think it's a cult? I just say, tell me your definition of cult, and then I will say yes or no.
Yeah.
Because there's all kinds of definitions as well.
Right. Yes. Any other questions out there? Um, Sam Walker saying you don't see what people are trying to hide. Yes. Um, Fran saying I like that church and not two by two. I think that that's maybe something that we could definitely work on as a community, to just start being a little bit more inclusive. Because I do feel like that the second that two by two comes out your mouth, there's a automatic. barrier. And that has been made very clear to me in this last week. So I will personally be more mindful of that. So thank you, Bruce. Um,
Mhm.
so we are almost out of time. Does anybody else have any other questions for you? I want to know how many hours a week you spend on wings now, what your commitment is.
Um, we typically get we have discussions going on. We get emails coming in, and so sometimes we have to discuss how we're going to respond to them. I would say at this point now it's quietened down quite a bit. It might only be an hour or two a week at this point.
Oh, wow.
Um, in 2023, uh, it was hours per day
Yeah.
for months, and I didn't know how I was going to keep up with it, but we got through it. We got through it eventually. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, we're kind of again we're the news site, and
Yes.
yeah, that's it's settled down, and like I say, we got 6 people involved,
Right.
and it sort of takes the load off any individual now. So
So are you a registered charity of any kind, or is that how you have your board structure, or is that just for governance for yourself and for the social justice of it?
right, yeah. So we are because we're worldwide. Where
Right.
would you register, right?
Right.
We're definitely not a charity, a tax deductible charity at all. So we're
Right.
very much an informal board and always
Got
have
it.
been.
Okay.
And
Just wanted to clarify
yeah,
that.
I don't see that changing. Yeah.
Right.
But one thing I can say, I am just so impressed with so many people who have stepped up since 2023, set
Mm-hmm.
up groups like Bridges and Balm and Renewal North and discussion groups and so on. There's just so many good people have stepped up and are doing such great things. I can hardly believe it, and because it was so lonely, I guess you might say.
Yes.
Prior to 2023, we were just like
Yes.
kind of on our own, you know, and
Oh,
so
totally.
many good things have happened since then.
Yep. I remember all those AOL chats back in the early 90s, when I was just first, I left in 1993. So um, that really, yeah, all those little, I'm sitting and waiting for the dial up and getting in there to see, who was,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was just quite a time back then. And I met a lot of really great people that I'm still friends with today, to be honest with you. So that's been interesting. Gail's asking, where does Wings get all of your information that you share?
Well, it comes to us normally. We will have people come to us and say, "Can you publish this?" So yeah, it's pretty spontaneous, you might say. It just comes in and we examine it. We don't publish everything by any means, but we do publish what we feel would be helpful to the readership, and sometimes we will come across something ourselves that we want to publish, like the latest BBC article, for instance.
Hmm.
You know, that came across to me. That really triggered me because here we are 3 years later and no action on that particular case. And so I don't know if you noticed, but I did start a campaign, a letter writing
Yes,
campaign to the
I
Attorney General
participated.
of Saskatchewan. Yeah, and that was quite successful in terms of numbers. I don't know the numbers, but I do believe that we would have at least 200 letters went in because on my campaign sheet I had at least 200 views. On Wings, where we were looking for people to send in letters, we had several thousand views. So I'm thinking 200 to 400 letters went in.
Yeah,
I've had many people tell me that they sent one in.
yeah.
So, and I know that's only a fraction of them. So that was very successful. I do believe that it's motivating the legal system to move this along.
Yes,
So we'll see, but I think that hopefully we'll see some results there, and because we can't rely on the justice system to fix this, but it is part of it. It is part of
yes.
the solution,
Part of the process.
and
Yep,
yeah.
for sure.
So
Totally agree.
we need to encourage them to go along with this as well.
Yeah, I did. I even got a letter back.
Yes.
Um, so, oh, she's asking, Gail's also asking, so does it come in from other sites or specific people just reach out to you on a regular basis?
Yeah, it's mostly individuals that reach out to us. Yes, for sure.
Right. So Ivy's saying can't refer to the two by two religion as a church because they don't even have an actual building that's a church. My family that's in and was always hated going to funerals. That was a sexual church. Yeah. So there's a lot of that. And, lately, I don't know if you watched Bryce Erickson's interview the other day on Wednesday about the history of it and all of the Freemasonry and all of the things that really were at the foundation of the beginning of all the people who started this church with no name. So very interesting.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I didn't see that one, but one very interesting experience I had was that we were in Ireland in 2009, and a friend of ours over there got us in to visit John Long's son.
Oh, wow.
And you're aware of the John Long Journal, right?
Yes. Yes.
Well, he had the journal, so I
Wow.
had the journal in my hands, and he actually did more than one copy by hand, beautiful handwriting.
Wow.
But it was authentic because it was wrapped in the brown paper wrapping as a book cover type thing, and yeah, I was totally confident that Cherie's information was accurate,
Right.
but I did want to be able to say, I've seen this, and it's
Yes.
true. Yeah,
Right.
I'm not just saying, well, Sherry says it's true.
Yeah.
I can say it's true. And
Right.
the John Long Journal is just a great source of history because it's very,
Fascinating.
very real and authentic, as you mentioned.
Yep. Yep. We're going to be talking about Dr. Baldwin here pretty soon and something very similar to that. So, all right, my friends. Well, it is 11 o'clock. Our time is up. I always give last words. So I would like for you to end this conversation today. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for everything that you do all day, every day, that you have done for decades now, and for being a neutral voice and for being a leader that is leading with love. And that's what really matters. So last word goes to you, my friend.
Okay, well, I just want to repeat again just my gratitude for so many great people stepping up since 2023. There's so many resources now that did not exist 3 or 4 years ago, and I see so many people that I have such great respect for, um, even though that they're going through difficult transition themselves.
Yeah.
Uh, they're doing the work as well, and it's just so much gratitude because I guess from a selfish point of view, it's taken a load off me, off my shoulders, and everybody else is carrying the load, right? So that's just
Yes.
fantastic. So grateful for that.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you, my friend. And I'm sure we'll be chatting with you again sometime soon. So you have an amazing day. Appreciate your time and everything you did to get ready for today. So rock on. Here we go.
Okay. Thank you
Take
again,
care.
Crystal. Okay.
Yes.
Bye.